Let us prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And now if you just put your hand over your heart and extend your arms, I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that you are loved and you are lovable. You are loved and you are lovable. There is nothing more you can do. There is anything less than you can do. There's anything different you should do to be loved or to be lovable. You know, today is Father's Day, and sometimes some of our fathers were so hooked into conditional love. And so we had to do something in order to get that love. And because of that, some of us grew up unsure that we are lovable. You are lovable, and you are loved. Others of us had fathers who left before we were done receiving their love, and perhaps with childish eyes, we thought we caused that to happen. There's nothing you could have ever done to have a grown man leave before you were ready to have them leave. You are loved, and you are lovable. And still others of us had fathers that were more like the prodigal son's father. Compassionate men who loved us in special ways. I want to talk a little bit this morning, very briefly, because we've had so much church already, but I am going to just talk very briefly about this thing called the prodigal son. It's a parable from the time of Jesus, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what a parable is before I start. A parable is a story that is not true. It has no historical accounting. It is a story that teachers who are trying to teach something that's hard for their students to hear. And so instead of just going at it in a straight way, they go at it through a story. Because very often we can separate our emotions when we're hearing a story about somebody else's life, but we still get the idea. And so Jesus wanted to talk to his disciples about this notion of compassionate fathering. And because he knew it was going to be a hard sell, because in those days, rules were everything. People were very attached to the rules. And if you didn't follow the rules, you were not only sinning against the person who set the rule, but you were sinning against God itself. So he knew this was going to be a very hard sell. And yet he went on with this parable. And the parable begins, there was once a man with two sons. One son was the older son and one the younger son. One the behavior son and one the misbehavior son. Now, we're all in families, and those of you who have more than one child in your family, whether you're a parent or a sibling, you know very often there's a behavior and there's a misbehavior. And sometimes it does correspond with birth order, so that the older person, the older child is the behavior, and the younger child not so much. Okay? Well, that was the case in this story. Now, when I talk about these kinds of biblical references, I usually try and give equal time to all of the parts of the story. Because no matter what a birth order for us is, we know, you and I, as metaphysicians, that we are every part of that story. We are the father, we are the oldest son, we are the younger son, and we are the disciples themselves. We know all that. But today I'm going to really focus on the older son and what he has to contribute to us for our spiritual journey. Now, but let me just refresh this story for those of you who may not know the story. And quickly I'm going to go through it. The younger son decides, in that culture, the older son got the inheritance. And the younger son decided, you know what, I'm not going to delay my gratification anymore. I'm going to go out and have a good time. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to ask my dad for my inheritance, and I'm going to take off. Now, it doesn't seem like a very big deal to us in this time, in 2013, in this culture. It seems like kind of a normal thing to do. In that time, in that culture, it was absolutely disrespectful and amazing that anybody would even think that they could approach their father with such a request. It would sound to your ears like this. The young son goes up to the father and says, I wish you were dead. You aren't dying, so I want my money and I want to take off. And the disciples were like, oh my God, just get rid of this guy. Don't give him a penny, just get rid of him. But Jesus was trying to change the narrative here. And so he said to his disciples, the father said, okay, here's your money, go ahead. And the disciples said, okay, what are you, nuts? Get rid of him. And the father said, no. He's got to be able to feel his consequences, because that's how he will learn. And that's true for us too. We have to feel the consequences. All the advice in the world isn't going to make us do something. All of the rules in the world isn't going to make us do something. You know yourself. If you go on 3 dates and you bring the U-Haul up to the house after the 3rd date, you're probably going to have a little something to worry about later on down the line. It's not that successful. You know that if you don't read the fine print in your mortgage papers and this loan that's just too good to be true, and you're just going ahead with it, you're not reading anything, chances are down the line you're going to have some heartache. If you're one of those persons who goes to the doctor and they say, look, your cholesterol's off the hook, you better start eating right, and you keep going in and out of Jack in the Box and Big Mac and everybody, eventually you're going to have a consequence. Whereas nobody could have told you that. Nobody could give you all the advice in the world. Doesn't stop most of us from doing the things that we know are going to hurt us until we have a consequence. And the father knew that. He got that. And so the son goes off and he has a good time. Well, the Bible says he sinned. In this church, we probably say he had a really good time. But the problem is, he lost all of his money doing that, which sometimes happens, I'll tell you. Okay? And so he was poor, he was hungry, he needed something to eat, so he went out and he worked as a farmhand, and he was being mistreated by the farmer. And he said, you know what, I might as well go back and work as a farmhand at my father's house. And so he goes back, and there's lots of teaching points to that part of the story, but I'm going to skip over all of that in the interest of time and just say that he went back, and what he did was he walked up to his father's house. Now, I want you to remember that part. All he did was he went back and he walked up to his father's house, and the father came running out after him. It's important that we know that, because sometimes we think after we make big mistakes in our life, after we have big screw-ups in our life, that we have to do something Herculean. All he did was to be worthy. He walked up to his father's house. That's all we have to do. We have to be able to turn it around and walk back up to spiritual principles. We have to walk back up to love. We have to walk back up to harmony. We have to walk back up to abundance. And all of that will come running to us. That's our worthiness, to walk up to the presence of God. And that's what he did. Well, there was only one person who wasn't happy with all this. And I'll skip all over the parties and all that. But there was one person who wasn't going to any parties, and he was not happy, and that was the older son, the behavior. Why? Because he had fulfilled his duty. He had lived in duty. Now, what I call that is living in a paradigm. The paradigm says you delay your gratification, you live, you work, you're not happy, you're mad at everybody else who is happy, and you just put your head down and you work because someday you might get what's coming to you. That's a paradigm that many, many of us are living in. Those of you who are living in loveless marriages, listen to this parable. Those of you who are have friendships in which you are simply always giving, never receiving, listen to this parable. Because what's happened is you've started to begin to live in a bubble. You've lived in the bubble called the paradigm. Paradigms are just, they're persistent thoughts that happen to us over and over again until we allow them to build a box around us. We believe in them so deeply, they're not true, but we believe in them so deeply that we've allowed them to create a box around us. And that's what that young man did. He lived in that paradigm that created a box around him. You know, and then what happens is that we say life isn't fair. How many people have said that, or your kids have said that, and you've said to them, life isn't fair? See, what we want to do is to begin to take that grip that this paradigm has on us, this box of thinking, this way of thinking. And, you know, I don't know what it is for you. I know what my paradigms are, but I don't know what your paradigms are. But until we begin to walk out of that, we say things like, there's a glass ceiling. There is no glass ceiling. It's a paradigm. It's a thought process. It's a bubble that we are living in. And we need to be able to break out of it. We need to because paradigms will make you not only stop, but they will make you stuck, so you can't start again. That's the power of those kinds of thinking patterns in our life. Interracial, you know, Sylvia Aquino came once to church and told us about a paradigm that said interracial marriages could not happen. You could not marry outside of your race in the state of California. Her parents, one Filipino, one Mexican, they could not get married. They had to go to a different state. They had to drive to a different state. They broke through the paradigm. They didn't agree with it. They moved through it, and they were able to not only create their own love, but create a beautiful family as a result of that. Interracial marriages is simply nothing more than a paradigm. On Friday, those of you who were here for that phenomenal poetry reading by those two poets from New York, one of them, yeah, they were fabulous. And they did a multimedia presentation in which they told the story of these women in a small village in India. And a Coca-Cola bottling plant came in, and the bottling plant diverted all the water to the plant. So the women now, who lived there for a long time, had to walk 10 miles in order to get water every day. And those who were of a little older age couldn't make that journey, and they committed suicide. The paradigm is you can't fight corporations. Corporations are too big. It took a courageous person to say, that's just a paradigm, and I'm not going to buy into it. And those 100 women got together, and with a lot of persistence, Coca-Cola closed that bottling plant. That's what can happen when we stop agreeing with paradigms that are here on the planet. Fathers, those of you who are thinking that if I'm a father, I have to work a 9-to-5 job, but in my heart, I'm really an entrepreneur. That's a paradigm. Begin to look at it. Begin to see how you can break out of it. There's a paradigm that says people have to go to college to be billionaires. I Googled non-college graduate billionaires yesterday, and I came up with 31 names. Now, those of you young people in the room, I want you to go to college. But for those of you who are not going to college, don't let that stop you. That is a paradigm that you have to go to college in order to be able to do. I met a woman not long ago who was convinced she could never have a great relationship with a man. And so I asked her why she thought that. And she said, because I've never seen it modeled. My mother never had a great relationship with men. My aunts never had great relationships with men. And I wouldn't even know how to begin how to do it. I said, really? I said, do you have any siblings? Yeah, I have 2 sisters. Do they have do they have any relationship? Yeah, they're happily married. Really? Okay, well, how is it that if you grew up in the same house, they're able to walk toward harmony, walk toward mindfulness, walk toward forgiveness, walk toward right speech? And as they walk toward that, all those things, all those qualities of God came directly to them. How is that? It's because they were the misbehaviors in the family. They weren't going to behave in the way that the family structure had set up to do that, and you and I can do it. Well, here's the one thing, and I'm going to quit now, but, well, I'm not, in a minute, in another minute. Here's the one thing that we have to know. Here's what happens if you want to break your paradigm. Here's my new label that I'm giving myself. Sometimes I go out and I'm playing golf or going someplace and I don't know the people and they say, what do you do for a living? I don't want to say I'm a minister. And the reason is because people think they know what a minister is and how they should behave around a minister. And as much as I say, it's not that kind of church, I'm not that kind of minister, it doesn't matter. They still, So now what I say when somebody says, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm a paradigm whisperer. That's what I do. I'm a paradigm whisperer. That's my new thing. That's what I want to do in my life. So I said to the woman, well, what would happen if you just tried this? And by the way, how do you feel about your sisters? I don't like them. See? Same thing as in the prodigal son. I'm mad at them. So we worked at it, and we worked at it, and we worked at it, and we were able to find the paradigm. But paradigm hunting takes work. You have to be able to look at what's going on in your life in a really honest way. See, the truth is that the way to get out of paradigm is through awareness. The difference between a person who makes $150,000 a year and $150,000 a month is simply awareness. That's all it is. We all would agree in this church that we live in an infinite universe. We would agree with that. And so we would all say, well, yes, it's possible to make $150,000 a month, but not for me. And that might be true because of the paradigm that we're thinking. See, most of the thoughts that we have, we've inherited those thoughts. I've inherited thoughts of poverty consciousness because of how I grew up. I inherited thoughts of internalized homophobia because of how I grew up. I inherited thoughts of racism because of how I grew up. I inherited thoughts of suspicion about rich people because of how I grew up. Now, I can go around beating myself up because I have those thoughts and living a limited life, or I can begin to do the work to overcome them, to override them in my life. I want to end with a really quick story. It's about a man who was the third generation barbershop owner. And his barbershop was in a small farming community, very successful barbershop, because it's where when people would come to town to get food for themselves and for their animals, that's what they would come and get their hair cut. And they had stylists for men and for women there. And so everybody came to this, and they had a little donut area and coffee area. So everybody came there, they gathered, it was great. And then all of a sudden, it fell off. And the guy became more depressed and more depressed and more depressed. And his son came home from college and said to him, "Why are you so depressed?" He said, "Well, I didn't want to tell you, I didn't want to worry you, but we're going to go bankrupt in about a month." He said, "I just can't keep it going." He said, "After third generations, I'm going to be the guy who's going to lose the barbershop." And his son said, "Well, that's really that's a story that you can believe. It's a paradigm if you want to believe that. Or we could begin to look at this problem and throw everything we have at it and get as much awareness as we can on this notion that you're going to lose the shop." And so he said, "Well, let's just throw out some things. And this is what you have to do when you go home tonight. I want you to pick an area of your life, whether it's your relationship life, your prosperity life, your career life, your retirement life, your health life, whatever life it is. I want you to pick one, just one, that you want to see improved. And you're going to do what he's doing now, which is throwing every idea you can think of, all the good ideas and all the stupid ideas, all the ideas you've tried before and you don't want to do them anymore." And that's what the kid had the father do. "Well, let's just throw out it as." He said, "Well, we could advertise, but we've advertised. We could do this, but we've done that. We could do something else, but we could do that." And they kept throwing it at and throwing it at and throwing it at it. And then one time an idea clicked. And they knew it was the idea. The kid went back to college, and he called home about 3 weeks later, and he said, hi, Dad. And his dad's voice was strong, and it felt good. And he said, oh, Dad, I can just tell by your voice, you're so much healthier and better and happier. He says, yeah, it's going really well. He says, in fact, we're doing 11% better than the highest we've ever had in the shop. And he said, well, then it's working, isn't it? And the guy said, yeah, it is. You know what the idea was? I'm sorry. Why he was going down was because one of those cut rate, I don't want to say cut rate, more change, the chain haircuts places was coming in. They could give the haircuts so much cheaper. And in fact, they could give a haircut for $6. And the guy says, I could never give a haircut for $6. I couldn't keep the place open with haircuts for $6. So the idea they had was, we fix $6 haircuts. Big sign out in front. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that we are in the heart and the mind and the love, the absolute love of God. There's only one power, one presence, and that's the glory of God that shines through each and every one of us if we allow it to. It shines through our dance ministry. It shines through our teen. It shines through our First Lady. It shines through Justin doing the sound, our band, and Gary. It just shines through everyone. It's just shining right through. I give thanks for this. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.